Hey guys, new video. Another movie video. I don't know, for some strange reason I just wanted to talk about movies again. And this video, I want to say someone I'm subscribed to did a video on this. I know I saw someone do a video on this. I can't remember who it is. They might be subscribed to me too. I'm not sure. I'm trying. I don't know. I don't know who did it, but I do remember watching a video, guilty pleasure movies. And I don't know. All of a sudden, just kind of popped into my head in terms of what I wanted to talk about as far as movies go, and I think it's an interesting guilty pleasure movies. You know, the kind of movies that you're either embarrassed to watch or you know aren't very good, yet you get a weird sense of enjoyment from them. You know, they might be considered terrible or embarrassing, or just the kind of movies when you're watching them, you don't really want other people to know you like them. You like these movies. I've got a few. There's a few. So let's just get right into it with the first movie I'm going to mention. Is actually probably the only one on here that is not really a guilty pleasure, because I think it's probably the most underrated movie I've ever seen in my life. And that's Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Actually, pretty much every Arnold movie is a guilty pleasure in my book, but I think this is an excellent movie. It came out in the early 90s. It was like a box office bomb. Like, it made no money. Because I think Jurassic Park came out like a week before or after, and it just basically made sure that this movie was not going to make any money. But what it is basically a really clever, like, parody of Arnold action movies. It's really funny, and it's got some great action scenes to it too. Like, a lot of great lines to it. It's a very quotable movie. I think the only thing wrong with it, I think, is the length. Like, it goes on for way too long. But other than that, I don't know where the hate comes from. Like, it blasted in the reviews, and I don't know, I don't hear many people talk about it. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really fun, enjoyable movie that I think it's clever and funny. And it's the only movie on here that I don't consider it a guilty pleasure. Honestly, I love the fucking movie, and I think you're crazy if you don't like it, really. Well, no, yeah, I really do. I don't know. I love it, and I think it's fantastic. But yeah, that's the first one I wanted to mention. Not quite a guilty pleasure, but I just want to talk about this movie because I think it's like the most underrated movie ever. All right, now let's get into the movies I'm actually kind of embarrassed to admit I enjoy. And let's start things off with the Super Mario Brothers movie. Now, I'm not lying when I say this is probably my favorite video game movie, which a lot of people will think I'm crazy for that, but I guess, okay, the weird thing with this movie is a lot of video game movies I find to be very boring. They're just dull and bad in a way. Like, they've got crappy writing and lousy acting. I honestly, like, the only other video game movie I can think of that I kind of enjoy is like the first Mortal Kombat movie, which again is really cheesy. But I don't quite feel guilty liking that one, because I think a lot of people do kind of like that one. And the Silent Hill movie I actually like too. But the Super Mario Brothers movie is just insane. Like, this movie, it's like, I think the reason why I love it is you could tell, and I think it shows that the directors, I think it was like a wife and a husband directing team. You can tell they didn't know shit all about Super Mario Brothers or what it was. It feels like they didn't even play the video game. Like, it's one of the weirdest, most bizarre movies you'll ever watch. Like, it's just, and that's why I like it so much. It's just so insane. It's so crazy. The acting is so terrible. It's got so many, like, errors in it, and it's goofy, it's cheesy. It's like that early 90s cheese, and it's entertaining. I mean, that's why I like it. Yeah, it's a terrible movie, I'll fully admit that, but man, is it entertaining. And I think if it tried to be too much like the video game, which I don't know, like, how can you make a Super Mario Brothers movie? Again, it's so ridiculous. And then this is what they came up with this, like, this weird, I can't even explain it. Like, it's one of those movies where if you've heard it's terrible, and you probably have, but you haven't seen it, go watch it. You might be surprised with how much you enjoy it. It's absolutely, it's batshit insane. The next guilty pleasure movie is UHF. Now, this is a Weird Al movie. He stars in it. He wrote it. I don't think he directed it, but it's his movie. Made back in the early 90s. Well, not early 90s. I think it's late 80s. Actually, I think it's in the late 80s movie. It's like a movie where he kind of like has to run a like a TV station that's like like the ratings are terrible and it's going to be shut down, and he has to come in and save this TV station, and he just comes up with these crazy TV shows. It's got a lot of parodies and things like that. I can see why people hate it. It's really goofy, it's really cheesy in a lot of spots, and not all the jokes work. But the ones that do are just hilarious. There's a Rambo parody towards the end of the movie that, honestly, I've never laughed so hard watching a comedy in my life. I mean, it is a bad movie. I think it is a pretty bad movie overall. Like, I mean, this is not, not a highbrow comedy by any means, but I don't know. It's just a guilty pleasure movie. I enjoy watching it. It's entertaining, and it just makes me laugh with how stupid it is. Weird Al, I used to like Weird Al a lot when I was a kid. Not so much anymore. I don't know, his style of humor I found, I don't know, I'm just not really a fan of that kind of humor anymore. I really did when I was a kid. He's a genuinely funny guy in like interviews and stuff. And in like on YouTube, he's got like interviews with like musicians where he like puts himself into these interviews and asks like these crazy questions. Those are really funny. I really like those, but UHF, it's one of those movies that I liked it the first time I saw it, which was like in like 2002 or something, but I still really do like it. It's just really funny, even though I know how bad it is. The next movie is Soldier. Now this, I don't think a lot of people have probably heard of this movie. It came out in the late 90s, I want to say. It's a Kurt Russell movie, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. No, not the Paul Anderson, Magnolia, Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, the amazing filmmaker. This is the one that did the Resident Evil movies. Actually, he did one movie I really like. I might talk about that in like an underrated movies video. But he does a lot of shitty movies. Recently, Pompeii he did. Just really bad movies he comes up with. I think he did the Mortal Kombat movie, actually. So there's one that's okay. But Soldier is a weird one. It's like a sci-fi action movie where he's like this soldier that's like replaced by like these new kind of like improved soldiers, and they kind of like throw him on this junk planet because they have no use for him anymore. And then he gets involved in like this war, and I don't know. It's got some good ideas, but it kind of falls apart in terms of execution, and a lot of it is pretty unoriginal. It's the effects aren't that great. It feels very low budget, and Kurt Russell is terrible in it. He basically never talks, and whenever he does, it's I don't know. It's a bad movie. It's very bad, but for some strange reason, I can't help but be entertained by it. Every time I watch it, I sit through from start to finish. I never want to stop watching it. Admittedly, it kind of has like nostalgia for me in a way, because my friend really loved this movie when he was like when we were really young, because this came out in like 1999, so I was only 9 years old. We both just watched this movie constantly. Every time I'd go to his house, we'd watch this movie. So I think a lot of it might have to do with nostalgia, but I don't know. It's enjoyable. It's very violent too. Like, it's just really over the top violent, but I don't know. It's one of those movies that it could be a lot better. It could have actually been a really awesome action movie, but it's very flawed. But nevertheless, I think it's fun, and every time I watch it, I get a kick out of it. The next movie is Mean Girls. Now, some people might not consider this a guilty pleasure. To me, it's one of those movies, for some strange reason, I don't know, every time I watch it, and I really like this movie, I don't know, it's one of those movies that's embarrassing to admit I like for some reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that it just feels like a chick flick to me at times. But what can I say? It's funny. I mean, it makes me laugh. I think Tina Fey wrote and directed it, so maybe that's why I like it so much, because she's pretty funny. Although I haven't really watched 30 Rock. I don't know. I hear mixed things on it. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't know. Maybe I should give that show a chance. I don't know. But Mean Girls, it's just one of those movies that's just funny, and I think it stood the test of time. A lot of people, I think, really like this movie. But yeah, not too much to really say about it. I don't know. For some strange reason, I'm just kind of embarrassed to admit I like it. The next movie, the best Christmas movie of all time, Jingle All the Way. Sorry. Now this is a terrible movie. I won't lie. It's terrible. But like with a lot of Arnold movies, it's a guilty pleasure for me. It is just so entertaining. It's filled with so many great lines. it's just there's so many great moments and just the Arnold quotes in this movie. And the whole I like how it kind of tackles the whole commercialism of Christmas, which is something I don't see too often in movies really. I like that whole angle that movie takes, even though it's ridiculous and it's I don't know it's just over the top and it's and then Sinbad is in it. That alone makes it a bad movie. But I don't know. It's just one of those movies. Every Christmas I watch it. A lot of people it's a Christmas Story. Maybe even Elf in some cases. For me, it's Jingle All the Way. That's my Christmas movie. That's my favorite one. And again, nostalgia plays a part with this movie as well. It came out at the right time for me. I was young when this came out. I remember watching it in theaters. It came out at the right time for me. So there's that element to it as well. But a terrible movie, endlessly entertaining. The next one, Deep Blue Sea, a Rennie Harlin movie. A terrible director. Everything he does is just absolute shit. And this is another shitty movie. But unlike a lot of his movies, which I find just kind of boring, this is entertaining as hell. It's known for a particular good moment having to do with Samuel L. Jackson, which is like one of my all-time favorite movie moments ever. Terrible CGI sharks in this, just terrible acting, terrible writing. It's bad. It's a very bad movie. One notable thing with it is there is a bit of nostalgia here with this movie. I was like 9 when this came out, and despite it being so terrible, this movie actually gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I still remember having a nightmare and like screaming in the middle of the night, and my parents had to like come in, and that was. And I feel so embarrassed about that now because and maybe that's why this is such a guilty pleasure to me, but I enjoy it now. But back then, it's like, how would I ever have nightmares of such a terrible movie? And it actually was the part that gave me nightmares was the part to do with Samuel L. Jackson. Whatever. I'll just spoil it. Spoilers. He dies in the middle of like this epic speech. He's all just like, "We will survive. We're gonna make it through this." And while he's in the middle of this speech, the shark just comes up from behind him and just rips him apart, and he dies. And this is like 30 minutes into the movie, maybe. It's great. It's fantastic. It's worth seeing just for that moment alone. But yeah, oddly enough, I had nightmares of this. I think the only other movie I can think of back then, when I was like really young, that I had nightmares of was RoboCop, which is like one of my all-time favorite movies. When the guy, the acid, he gets completely dumped with acid and his face starts melting apart. That part, oh man, that gave me nightmares. I gotta admit, because a funny side story here, RoboCop 3 was the first RoboCop movie I saw, and I really liked it as a kid. Of course, now I think it's utter shit. But when I was a kid, I liked that movie. I thought it was amazing. So, being a fan of that, I went to Blockbuster and rented RoboCop 1, not knowing what was in store for me. And yeah, those that know, that's a pretty fucking violent movie. Tons of blood, tons of gore, and that acid part, which that scarred me, man, when I was a kid. Of course, now it's like one of my all-time favorite movies. But yeah, as a kid, that was pretty intense. Going from like the PG-13 RoboCop 3 to that. Yeah, Deep Blue Sea, entertaining as all hell, really terrible movie, like a lot of these. The next movie is The Good Son, an early 90s movie that, again, probably a movie that not too many people have heard about. Now, this, Macaulay Culkin, and Elijah Wood, actually, before Lord of the Rings, they're both kids. It's like, it looks like a kid's movie on first glance. If you even watch a trailer even of this movie and the posters and stuff, oh man, this movie is brutal. It's crazy. Macaulay Culkin basically plays the most evil kid in movie history. This kid, he's nasty. I mean, just you got to watch this movie. It's one of those movies I recommend to a lot of people. It's bad. It's a very bad movie. It's really, the tone is all over the place. The writing it's really terrible. It's got no style to it. But it's almost worth watching. Just going from like Home Alone to this is crazy. And I have to wonder if like a lot of kids back in the day, like the kids that went and saw Home Alone and Home Alone 2, if their parents like took them to see this just because it has Macaulay Culkin in it, although it is a rated R movie. But I mean, in Canada, this might have been 14A, who knows? But it's crazy. And that's why it's a guilty pleasure to me. It's entertaining in spots, and it's just, to me, the guilty pleasure part of it is just how crazy it is for a Macaulay Culkin movie, and just how dark and brutal it is. The next one, Final Destination, every single one of them. I think a lot of people find this to be like a guilty pleasure series. Yeah, they're bad movies, but man, are they fun. Just seeing how creative they can get with the kills. Again, not too much to say. The acting is always bad. The storylines are always terrible. The writing is always terrible. Like they're bad movies. They're, just to put it simply. The first one at least was like original, but all the rest of them, of course, weren't. But I mean, it's just fun to see what they can come up with the kills. And of course, like there's the 3D ones, which are always a fun to watch. But yeah, the entire Final Destination series definitely a guilty pleasure. The next movie, Adventures in Babysitting. Now this movie to me just like is the 80s. Like, granted, I wasn't born in the 80s. I didn't grow up through the 80s. This movie kind of makes me wish I did. And it's odd. I like almost have like a nostalgia for a time period I didn't live in. When I watch this movie and other movies like Big and The Breakfast Club and things like that. I don't know what it is with like 80s movies, but they capture that time period so well, it seems. And this to me is one of the best ones. It's not a great movie, but it's just one of those really fun movies. It's really over the top. It's just a really fun movie to watch. Even though it is pretty terrible. And I gotta say, I don't like admitting I enjoy it. It's not a movie I hear too much about. To me, I think it stands up with like, well, okay, no, it doesn't, because this is a terrible movie where The Breakfast Club is actually damn good. So, but it's one of those movies that like, if you haven't seen it and you're like a fan of the '80s, definitely go and seek this one out. I think it's a really enjoyable movie, despite being pretty lousy. Okay, these last two are the big ones. Probably the ones I'm most... one is like the all-time guilty pleasure movie. This next one is the one that's... A lot of people might laugh at this one. Gigli. Now, a movie that's considered to be one of the worst movies ever made. I don't mind it. I gotta say, I don't know where the hate comes with this one. I mean... I thought it was funny. The like romantic elements just completely fall flat. The tone is all over the place. Some of the stuff that's trying for comedy, it's trying to make you laugh, is just horrifically bad. But I found most of this movie to be pretty funny. The dramatic elements again are just like the facepalm type stuff. Ben Affleck is terrible. Like the chemistry between him and Jennifer Lopez is just non-existent. And maybe that's why I like this movie. It is just such a complete mess that it's entertaining. I mean, it's another thing. It's so long for what it's trying to tell. Like the story it's trying to tell. This movie just seems so... I'm surprised like this movie got made. Like okay, the reviews are justified. It's bad, but I mean, there's a certain level of entertainment you can get with a movie like this, and I genuinely thought like some of the comedic stuff actually did work. I don't know. I've seen it like 3 times now, and it's just as good as the first time I saw it. It's one of those movies that I'd like get a bunch of friends together and just watch it. You might be surprised with how like enjoyable it is. Again, though, I'm defending a piece of shit here, really. And I admit, yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that I like this movie, considering like the reviews it gets, and just like I don't know, it's a complete mess. This movie, it's a oddly entertaining, like fascinating mess. And I don't know, I love it, man. Gigli, it's that ultimate guilty pleasure movie, other than the next one I'll talk about. And the ultimate guilty pleasure movie, one that I think a lot of people might agree with me. I know I've seen it on quite a few lists, and that's Showgirls. Now, Paul Verhoeven, probably one of my favorite directors. Like, he's in my top 5. Honestly, I think Hollow Man might be his weakest movie, and even that I kind of enjoy. That's another movie that's kind of like so bad it's good. Showgirls is the ultimate so bad it's good movie. Where do I start with this movie? NC-17 rated, box office bomb back in the early 90s. Tons of sex and nudity, but some of the weirdest sex scenes I've ever seen in a movie. They are bizarre and hilarious, which is the most important thing. And that's the whole movie in a nutshell. It's fucking hilarious. Like, it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. The main character, I forget the actress who plays her, Elizabeth something, Berkley, I think her name is. Her acting is abysmal. But her character is the most interesting thing. I don't understand this character. Maybe she's actually got bipolar, which would make the movie not funny, but they don't mention that. I don't think they've mentioned that in interviews, but her personality changes on the drop of a hat. Like, it's just, at one moment she'll be like all happy and carefree, and then the next she'll be just screaming in a complete utter mess. The dialogue in this movie, written by Joe Esterhazy, it is the weirdest dialogue. Like, some of the lines that come out of the characters' mouths in this are baffling. Like, they are just bafflingly hilarious and bad. It's, part of a reason why I like it too is I like actually just how they show kind of how they, it's kind of like a rise and fall story almost, similar to like Goodfellas or Casino, and I always love that kind of shit, so it's got that element to it, though it fails spectacularly with its execution. But yeah, just crazy ass weird sex scenes, just random nudity everywhere where you think where it just doesn't fit in. It's like an NC-17 movie, and they just trying to make it NC-17. Just the really bad acting. The writing, as I said before, is crazy. It's like over the top. The spectacle is just out of control. I mean, it's just pure mad filmmaking. I don't know, like, Paul Verhoeven, I mean, you gotta respect the guy for putting out a movie like this. It is kind of that ultimate guilty pleasure, just entertaining from start to finish, though just painfully bad, but in the best way possible. Definitely watch Showgirls. I mean, it's one of the most entertaining movies you'll ever watch. That will do it. Those are all the guilty pleasure movies I have. There was some I was thinking of that was like, I was about to say them, but I don't know, there's a lot of movies that I think some people might think are bad or average, where I think are genuinely good. Last Action Hero is one that comes to mind. I might do a video on that later, but anyways, guys, let me know what guilty pleasure movies you have, what movies you're embarrassed to admit you like, and things like that. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.